Hey everyone, this is Jan and John's Adventures, and today we're going to start this adventure in 1987. And at this time, Jan and I had the opportunity to be ushers for a big event at Rupp Arena in Lexington, Kentucky. And it was a service where they commissioned new missionaries. Well, this is really big, big stuff. And so we were excited about going and doing this. We'd never been to a thing like this before. And so we went and we got to do that. And as we were sitting there watching all this, the pageantry and everything like that happening at Rupp Arena, well, God really was touching my heart. And so the speaker got up there and he spoke. And I mean, it was very compelling. And wow, I was like, oh, this is awesome, man. Maybe we should be a missionary. I wonder how Jan's responding to this. And after it was over, after we'd done doing all of our ushering, I met with her to go to ride home. And the first thing she said to me was, John, I think we're supposed to be missionaries. Of course. And so we were both excited about maybe trying to be missionaries, foreign missionaries in another country. So we decided we were going to apply and we were going to do it right away. So we found out who we needed to talk to, and we started filling out paperwork, and we went through there was just all this complicated forms and everything else, and interviews you had to go through and interviews, and it was all real difficult. It was going to take like 6 or 8 months. And finally, somebody said, well, there's no reason you should go through all this because they're not going to accept you anyhow. I said, why not? Because you have two children, they said. Well, yeah, we have two daughters. One was about 11 years old, another about 7 years old at this time. And they said, well, the mission organization is not accepting anybody with children right now. Well, so much for that idea. And so we kind of like threw that idea out the window and we went on with our lives. And, at that point in time, our daughters were growing up, and we were deciding to, maybe God does want something more, maybe not missionaries, but God wants something more for us. And so we began to think, we began to pray about it, and God came up with this plan. And the plan was kind of drastic, but we decided we were going to put our trust in Him, and we were going to quit our jobs and go back to school. And that is exactly what we did. Jan went back to school at the University of Kentucky with the idea of being a teacher. And I went back to school, started at University of Kentucky and finished at Southern Seminary in Louisville. And I went back with the idea of being in the ministry. Well, no jobs, no real. I had a part-time job as a pastor of a really, really small rural church, really small. Sometimes the entire congregation was whoever we brought with us in the car and got there. That was the entire, it was small. But we did that, and I don't know how we did it, but we survived those years and went forward. I did become a pastor. Jan did become a teacher, and she only taught for a year, and she found out that middle schoolers are brutal, and so that was enough of that. So she went to work for Toyota. I was pastor in a church, and everything was going good, and things were rolling along. We were growing in those times. I mean, we were getting a lot of new relationships. We were growing in our ability to relate to people and to lead people. I had gone from a factory worker to a pastor, and Jan had all these roles that she was filling, and the girls were growing up. I mean, they were beautiful girls. They were growing up. And so let's just fast forward all that right up to the year 2000. And, we had actually, with some of the churches that we were involved with, one of the churches, we had gone on some short-term mission trips. And, you know, those are exciting. We went to Russia one year, we went to Poland another year, and we saw some amazing things happen. I mean, it was just pure fun. And I thought, well, you know, I remember back to the day, way back in 1987 in Rupp Arena. And I thought, well, that's going to be the extent of our missions. We'll do these short term, 2 week, 10-day mission trips. And, you know, that'll be fine. And so, you know, there we were doing these short-term mission trips, and we were scheduled to go on a short-term mission trip in June of 2006. And so I got word, though, that the missionaries that were on the field there were coming home, and they were coming home because, you know, they had some problems that they needed to look at, health problems. And so I thought, well, who's going to be there to greet us? We don't know our way around. I mean, how are we going to do that? And so, you know, so I called the Kentucky Poland Partnership Office. And there are two wonderful people that have been so instrumental in our lives. One's named Carla, and the other's named Calvin. And Carla and Calvin work for the Kentucky Poland Partnership. And I called there, and Carla answered the phone, and I said, Carla, I was just wondering, we're scheduled to go, this was March, we're scheduled to go on a short-term mission trip to Poland in June, and I just wondered who's going to be there to greet us. And she said, well, you know, we don't know exactly right now, and Calvin is in a meeting, and oh, she said, wait a minute, I see him, he's coming down the hall. And she said, just hold on a minute, you can talk to him. So I was just holding there, I was going, and Calvin picks up the phone and says, hello, John. And I reiterated the problem. I said, Calvin, I was just wondering who is going to be there in Poland to greet us when I bring my team in June. And without even hesitating, he said, why don't you and Jan do it? What happened next is kind of epic. Because what happened next after he made that statement, why don't you and Jan do it, is, well, I was in my home, let's set it up like this. I was in my home office when I made this call. And I was in one of those office chairs that leans back, and I was all reared back. And my feet were even on the desk when I was talking to him. And when he said, why don't you and Jan do it, something happened, and my feet went up, and my chair fell over, and I went head over heel, and the phone went flying, and I mean, I kicked so high up in the air, I think I hit a Millennium Falcon mobile that was in the hanging from the ceiling that I had in my home office. I mean, I was all over the place. Chair was flying, phone flying, everything. And finally, I gathered myself back together, and I said, I picked up the phone and said, Calvin, are you still there? And he said, John, are you all right? I said, yeah, I think so. And he said, well, did you hear my question? I said, yes, I heard that question. And would you give me a little time to talk to Jan about that? And he said, sure, take a couple of days, take whatever you need. Well, we both knew that that's what God wanted us to do. And ever since 1987, God had been working on this plan to get us on the mission field. And we didn't even know it. We'd kind of like, it had always been a calling, more of a calling for Jan. To me, it had kind of turned into like this dream, this desire that was, you know, way far off in the distance. It would never happen. But God said, John, we get your attention. I am going to knock you out of your chair. And he did. Now, that was March. By May, Jan and I were in Poland, getting ready to receive teams that were coming in June. We didn't know how to speak the language. We didn't even know how to read the maps. I mean, we didn't know anything, but we were ready. And the strangest thing is that when Calvin wasn't on the phone when I first called, Calvin wasn't there in the office. Well, he was in a meeting. The meeting was that they were praying about who to get to be the volunteer coordinators for the Kentucky-Poland Partnership living there in Poland. And he left that meeting, came, grabbed the phone, and asked me to do it. I mean, that's just crazy, isn't it? Well, that's what I thought. That is totally crazy. But anyway, that's how that wonderful story happens and how we got to Poland. And, you know, we just got a fast pass. I mean, there was no months and months of interviews. There was no tons and tons of paperwork. There was no, you know, you can't do this, or you can't do that, you can't do that. They needed volunteer coordinators. And the mission organization said, go ahead. So we had a fast pass to be volunteer coordinators. Now, what do we learn from all that? Well, number one, I guess you could say that we learned that, you know, don't really give up on a dream. Don't give up on a vision. Don't give up on a desire that you have. It may be way out there, but you know, just keep moving forward. And that's what we did. We moved forward during that time between the 13 years that we waited. We were always moving forward. And we didn't even really have that goal in mind because we thought that was something that wasn't going to happen. And the other thing I can say is that God does want to give you the desires of your heart. So don't give up. Don't give in. Keep trying, keep moving forward, and God will knock you out of your chair.